Good evening and welcome to the DebtCircle Sundown brief for the 18th of June 2026. Let's begin with today's highest yield listed corporate bond transactions. Unifin's Capital India Limited recorded a yield of 18.00% with a trade value of 5.00 lakh rupees. Another Unifin's Capital India Limited bond recorded a yield of 17.25% with a trade value of 20.00 lakh rupees. Akara Capital Advisors Private Limited recorded a yield of 15.90% with a trade value of 100.00 lakh rupees. Regency FinCorp Limited recorded a yield of 15.50% with a trade value of 20.00 lakh rupees. Another Akara Capital Advisors Private Limited bond recorded a yield of 15.10% with a trade value of 1.00 lakh rupees. Moving to the highest yield unlisted corporate bond transactions. Infifresh Foods Limited recorded a yield of 17.00% with a trade value of 250.00 lakh rupees. Wisdom Finance Private Limited recorded a yield of 14.45% with a trade value of 700.00 lakh rupees. Hindon Mercantile Limited recorded a yield of 14.00% with a trade value of 500.00 lakh rupees. Apex Homes Private Limited recorded a yield of 14.00% with a trade value of 4,246.67 lakh rupees. Greenco RJ01 IREP Private Limited recorded a yield of 13.70% with a trade value of 7,300.00 lakh rupees. Now let's look at mutual fund debt market activity. Gross purchases stood at 34,076.71 crore rupees. Gross sales stood at 35,018.65 crore rupees. Net investment was negative 941.94 crore rupees. Month to date net investment for June stands at negative 74,958.570 crore rupees. Turning to foreign portfolio investor participation in the debt market. Under the general limit category, gross purchases were 1,038.71 crore rupees. Under the voluntary retention route or VRR, gross purchases were 273.36 crore rupees. Under the fully accessible route or FAR, gross purchases were 1,962.56 crore rupees. Gross sales under the general limit category were 71.11 crore rupees. Gross sales under VRR were 90.91 crore rupees. Gross sales under FAR were 1,289.21 crore rupees. Net investment under the general limit category was 967.60 crore rupees. Net investment under VRR was 182.45 crore rupees. Net investment under FAR was 673.35 crore rupees. Month to date net investment for June stands at 7,840.45 crore rupees under the general limit category, 3,840.78 crore rupees under VRR, and 18,983.78 crore rupees under FAR. For the calendar year 2026, year-to-date net investment stands at 4,445 crore rupees under the general limit category, 889 crore rupees under VRR, and 33,597 crore rupees under FAR. Let's move to money market rates. The call rate closed at 5.33%. Tri-party repo stood at 5.04%. Basket repo stood at 5.20%. Special repo stood at 5.13%. Now for India government bond yields. The 1-year yield stood at 5.74%. The 3-year yield stood at 6.26%. The 5-year yield stood at 6.48%. The 7-year yield stood at 6.74%. The 9-year yield stood at 6.87%. The 10-year yield stood at 6.84%. The 15-year yield stood at 7.13%. The 30-year yield stood at 7.48%. Moving to Treasury bill yields and auction cutoffs. The 91-day Treasury bill yield stood at 5.26%. The 182-day Treasury bill yield stood at 5.50%. The 364-day Treasury bill yield stood at 5.79%. Let's review liquidity indicators. Net liquidity injected was negative 1,04,717 crore rupees. Standing deposit facility, or SDF, stood at 1,77,254 crore rupees. Marginal standing facility, or MSF, stood at 237 crore rupees. Turning to MIBOR OIS rates. The 1-year rate stood at 5.90%. The 2-year rate stood at 6.04%. The 3-year rate stood at 6.14%. The 5-year rate stood at 6.30%. Modified MIFOR rates were as follows: 2-year at 6.85%, 3-year at 6.84%, 4-year at 0.00%, 5-year at 7.07%. Now for currency markets. The US dollar closed at 94 rupees and 43 paise against the Indian rupee, compared with 94 rupees and 54 paise previously. The euro closed at 108 rupees and 18 paise, compared with 109 rupees and 60 paise previously. The British pound closed at 124 rupees and 82 paise, compared with 126 rupees and 75 paise previously. The Japanese yen closed at 0 rupees and 59 paise, unchanged from the previous session. The Chinese yuan closed at 13 rupees and 96 paise, compared with 13 rupees and 98 paise previously. Let's look at commodities and market indices. Gold, 24 carat, 99.9% purity, closed at 14,951 rupees per 10 grams, compared with 15,110 rupees previously. Silver closed at 2,600 rupees per 10 grams, compared with 2,650 rupees previously. Crude oil closed at $78.68 per barrel, compared with $79.69 previously. The Sensex closed at 77,409.98, compared with 77,155.62 previously. The Nifty closed at 24,168.00, compared with 24,085.70 previously. Finally, let's review today's primary corporate bond issuances. NIIF Infrastructure Finance Limited issued 500 crore rupees of bonds with a tenure of 39 months and a coupon of 7.88%. The issue carries a AAA rating from CARE Ratings Limited and a AAA rating from ICRA Limited. ANS Private Limited issued 80 crore rupees of bonds with a tenure of 25 months and a coupon of 0.00%. The issue carries a BBB- rating from Infomerics Valuation and Rating Private Limited. That concludes the DebtCircle Sundown brief for the 18th of June 2026. Thank you for watching. Have a great evening.